against crime, where, the army interacts with society on the streets. And in the Guacamaya papers, the Guacamaya leaks, we got a glance of the real influence that the Mexican army has in society. What's your opinion? What do you think about this?
No es ninguna solución, al contrario, es parte del problema. La militarización en México tiene raíces históricas, ¿no? Otra vez regresamos a los años 70, la Guerra Sucia, la
It is not a
lucha
solution. On the
antizapatista y la
contrary, it is part of the problem. Militarization in Mexico has historical roots. Once again, we return to the 1970s, the Dirty War, the anti-Zapatista struggle in the 1990s. But the scheme has deepened, and paradoxically, it has been done by a left-wing government, with a president who had said during his campaign in 2018 that he was going to return the military to the barracks. And he did the opposite. It not only deepened the military scheme, but it even institutionalized it. After the legalization of Peña Nieto's internal security law, now with the National Guard, we clearly have public security dominated by military interests. So it is very curious to see how governments from different parties have alternated. PAN, PRI, now Morena, and yet militarization has deepened even more. And what you say there is very true, in the sense that with this government, the current one, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the Army, and in particular the Secretary of National Defense, have been empowered, but also to the Navy, in an extraordinary way, giving new prerogatives that are unrelated to security work. Today in Mexico, the Navy, for example, manages customs. What does the Navy have to do with customs? But there it is. The Secretary of National Defense is now going to run an airline, for example. It is going to run a civil airline. And this is how, successfully, military interests were imposed to such a degree that today we can see that the Mexican army is a state within a state. And today we know that this strategy of militarization in the fight against crime is a failure. It is a counterproductive strategy that only deepens the spiral of violence and the vicious circle of violence. We, the sociologists, have already measured the effects of the military operations and where they have sent military convoys to supposedly fight against crime. The only thing that has been achieved is to further deepen the rates of violence, with more homicides, more kidnappings, more forced disappearances. And then it is not part of the solution, on the contrary. Another problem is how to later recover that given power granted to the military. It will be very difficult for future governments, for the civilians, the civil institutions, to recover these prerogatives granted to the military. And finally, it will also become a problem for the army itself, because in the long run, it won't suit the military either. Now they can have immediate economic interests of gain. It is very profitable for them at the moment, but they are exposing themselves to the danger of corruption. And although the secrecy and opacity that have historically surrounded the Secretary of National Defense in Mexico, the Ministry of National Defense protects it from certain scandals and their media coverage. These scandals are going to emerge sooner or later. It's only a matter of time because the military is no less corrupt than the police or the judges or the prison guards. They're equally corrupt and corruptible, and they face this danger, and the scandals are already coming out. There was a problem with the former head of the Secretariat, General Cienfuegos, who a few years ago was accused in the United States of ties to organized crime. There are the McCall links that you just mentioned, and the problem with this abrogation of power is growing, which the army is facing, is the corruption of its cadres, its high command, and, on the other hand, the danger that the problem of human rights and its violation by part of the military. A few months ago, for example, a video was released in Tamaulipas of an extrajudicial execution by a military patrol. I don't know if you've seen this video. It's from a supermarket surveillance camera where it is clearly seen how, following a persecution, the military patrol arrives and ends up executing the alleged criminals. So we are facing these problems of corruption and violation of human rights instead of exploring alternatives, such as police reform and the legalization of certain drugs and the production of medicines. In short, instead of looking for alternatives, it persists in a militaristic paradigm that has already proven to be a lost war for several decades.
Se obstina en un paradigma militarista que